Hey now, I love brewing American wheat beers. I find, first of all, that they are a hit with any crowd, whether it's your experienced craft beer drinker or your lighter lager drinker. Everybody seems to like that style of beer. Also, from a brewing perspective, it allows for some interesting interpretation within that style, and I like to play around with the grist and the hopping and sometimes even the mash temperature whenever I brew this beer. Now, the last time I did it, I went with some oats in the grist, and that gave it a little sort of silky mouth feel and a little bit of extra body, and then I played around with some green bullet hopping in there. This time I'm going to go with some Vienna malt and a slightly lower mash temperature, as well as some classic Mount Hood hops in there. So let's try it out. Taking a look at my malt here, I'm starting off with a base of 64% Rahr 2-row malt, so just a nice clean North American 2-row malt. I've got 32% of Canada Malting white wheat malt, and that's going to give some nice body, hopefully a little bit of tang. Might wind up with a slightly cloudier beer as a result of that. That's perfectly acceptable in a wheat beer. I'm going with 2% of Simpson's Crystal Light, so that's like a Crystal 40, and that should give just a hint of color and maybe a touch of body and maybe just the barest hint of sweetness. And then I'm going with that Weyermann Vienna malt, and that's coming in at 4%, and that should give it just a little bit of toastiness and again, probably a little bit of color addition. So let's get this milled up. I've got my dust mask on here so I'm not coughing for the rest of the day. I'm gonna fire up the mill. This is quite a bit of grain. I've got the Monster Mill 3mm Pro with the hopper extension here, and it filled it up quite a bit, which is awesome, but it's gonna make really quick work of it. I love this mill. Now I'm doing this as a 15-gallon batch, and I'm shooting for a beer that's gonna be in the low 4%. So this is quite a bit of grain, but using those malt, let's get that little chunk of bag out of there. But looking at the percentages, it's easy to scale this for any size of recipe. So it is time to mash in here. I'm going with a thinner mash. It's a 4 liter per kilogram ratio here. That's because of that wheat malt. I'm just going with this single step mash. I'm going to be mashing here at 150 Fahrenheit or 65.5 degrees Celsius, and that's going to hopefully result in a nicely attenuable wort, but something that maybe has still just a little bit of body to it. Just going to give this a quick mix. Oh, check out that initial wort. So cloudy. That's going to change a bit here. So we are right at our desired mash temperature there, and we're just going to let this recirc for an hour. After my 60-minute mash, you can see this wort's quite a bit clearer for a wheat beer, and I'm now stepping up to my mash out temp of 168 Fahrenheit or around 75 degrees Celsius. Once it's there, we're going to hold it for about 15 or 20 minutes to make sure the whole mash is nice and warm. And now we are running off into the boil kettle. Woo! Flame on! We have just hit a boil, so naturally it's time for me to add some of these hops here. We're going for a 60-minute addition, and this is 74 grams of 6% alpha acid Mount Hood hops. And these are going to provide almost the entirety of the 18 IBUs that we're going for in this beer. Very carefully. Have a nice little boil going on here. So yeah, this will be a 60-minute boil and no more hops until flame out. After that hour, we just flamed out, and we are going to add some flameout hops here. It's 84 grams of Mount Hood again. Following those flameout hops, I whirlpooled, let this sit for about 20 minutes, and we are now running off into these carboys here. You can see I've got the 3 of them lined up. We're running through my Blickman Therminator plate chiller here. And you can also see that I've got this drain hose up here, and I'm going to run it like that because that's allowing a little extra aeration to occur with even just the filling of these carboys. So it's a little hard to tell on the video here, but reading below the meniscus, we're actually at 1045, which is good. It's a couple points higher than I was shooting for, but you know, there you go. So I'm just a degree away from pitching temperature here on this wort, and so I'm going ahead and aerating them just by swirling, as you can see here, for approximately a minute. With that original gravity of 1045, I don't really need to do any more than this. The rehydrated yeast packs of USO5 that I'm adding here will be more than sufficient to ferment that low gravity of a beer. And it is time to add my rehydrated yeast. I just did this in some flasks here, which I like to do because I've got a stir plate and whatnot. Really great way just to rehydrate this yeast here. Let us add I'll do this with all 3 carboys, and then I'll get them set up with their carboy hoods and the blow-off tubes. So our beers are all hanging out at 67 Fahrenheit with a fermentation temperature target of 68, so it should hit that shortly. You can see that they're all set up here with these carboy hoods. We've got these blow-off tubes going into that blow-off bucket down there, and then the temperature probes going to all 3 of these here. So yeah, all good to go. 13 hours in, we've got some signs of life here, sort of in varying degrees. 24 hours in, and we're seeing some very nice, healthy, typical fermentation. After fermentation was really rocking there for a bit, I ramped the temperature up to 72 Fahrenheit just to ensure maximum attenuation. Once that occurred, I crashed it down into the mid-60s here, which is the temperature in the basement brewery. And now I am just pressure transferring into some corny kegs, and then I can begin to clarify. On the forced attenuation test, this American wheat beer is coming in at 1010. And reading below the meniscus, this American wheat beer has finished off its fermentation at 1010, so that matches the forced attenuation test. Awesome. So after chilling down those kegs, firing some gelatin in them just to clarify them a little bit and draw some of that yeast out, we transferred into carbonation kegs, carved them up, and they're on tap. So let's give this a taste. And here we go. Yeah, look at that. Well, she sure is pretty for a wheat beer. Pretty clear. Man, it's almost like there's no wheat in it, but we know that it's got at least a third of the grist there. Smelling it, we've got that wheaty tang. Okay, so that helps out. Also, just a little bit of the tiniest little bit of toastiness coming out of that Vienna malt there, and just a little bit of clean hop character, which is expected with those malthood hops. Some really delightful toastiness. I like that. Just a little bit. Pairs super nicely with the wheat malt tang that I was hoping for there. You've got the softness of that wheat malt. You've got that nice toastiness with the Vienna malt, and that just gives us a ton of character, and yet it's still just a really nice light wheat beer. So I'm glad I didn't go with any sort of aggressive hop additions for flavor here. Just the bitterness, just the aroma there, and then that really lets the malt character shine. A little bit of that C40 character coming out, a little bit of the toastiness of the Vienna malt. Just absolutely beautiful. Really nice, delicious wheat beer, and something that like a craft beer drinker would enjoy, but also somebody, again, who likes those lighter beers would have this and be totally satisfied. So great beer, all weather, particularly in the sun, would be fantastic. So give it a whirl if you want, and until next time, keep your at 11.